You're listening to My Far North Cabin, an off-grid homesteading podcast from the woods of Alaska. On this show, we discuss survival in snowbound haunted hotels, staying alive in the woods while shooting documentaries about witches, and how to know when to turn back while there's still time. Oh, welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for coming back again. And by the time that I'm releasing this episode, it is the night before Halloween, so naturally, I have to ask, are you planning on going hiking to the woods soon to maybe overnight camp and shoot a documentary about a local legend, or maybe headed up to the secluded mountain cabin to finish writing a novel? Or maybe you're going to be stationed at a remote base in Antarctica, or, I don't know, heading to outer space anytime soon? Even if there's no chance in hell of you doing any of these things ever, there is a lot to be learned from the films about those who did. And that's what this special episode is actually all about. So I've brought back one of my favorite guests to the podcast, my mom, because she and I are huge fans of classic horror films. And this episode's inspiration actually came to me from all the talks that she and I have had about how many of our favorite horror films contain a lot of really valuable lessons about survival, especially when it comes to the wilderness, snow, extreme cold, as well as isolated and really alien environments. And while the films that we're going to talk about, while they totally have a supernatural or a sci-fi element as their backbone, there are very real themes throughout them where the main characters are contending directly with either Mother Nature, unstable individuals, their own fears, or all of the above. So today, my mom and I are going to spend this hour-long special going over these favorite movies of ours and what their cultural impact was like, what their impact on us personally was like, and what important lessons we can learn from them, and just how freaking cool they are. So I'm warning you right now, there will be spoilers, but the movies that we're going to talk about have been out for a while, so don't blame us if we ruin it for you. So I hope you enjoy it. Don't get too freaked out now. Hopefully we'll all learn some valuable lessons today. Hey, Mom. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. How you doing, sweetie? I'm so happy to see you, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's so great to have you back again. For those of you listening, Mom and I can see each other on Zoom, and I can see her amazing costume. She has a dinosaur hoodie, looks like a dinosaur swallowing her head, and a t-shirt she painted herself with the Jurassic Park logo that says Coupon Day, which is perfect little in-joke for Jurassic Park fans. We are such huge fans of that movie.
Absolutely. I remember I used to take you guys camping, and I'd show you all three of the movies on my little, 6x5-inch DVD player. That was sort of our thing when you guys were little. I'm so into it. I haven't ever gotten out of it for some reason.
Hey, we're always into the creature feature. It definitely counts as one, for sure. And yeah, I couldn't really think of anything as good as your costume, so saw through the head was about what I could come up with.
I adore that. I mean, it's actually quite creepy. It looks like a real saw, by the way.
I know.
It's not like just some plastic whatever. It looks really spooky.
It kind of is, but I'll probably end up sharing a video of this Zoom meeting on Instagram. Well, I think that I'm really excited about this episode because this is kind of a special. We're breaking all the rules a little bit by veering off to talk about movies instead of Alaska. And since it's Halloween, which is our personal favorite holiday, you and me and Mom, we love Halloween. It's kind of ridiculous how much we love Halloween. And today our premise is talking about some of our favorite horror flicks and specifically the survival situations they're in and how we might be able to survive those movies, how we might want to approach that so that we can actually live through it. So, Mom, you find this exciting, right?
You bet. And for my own survival during this episode, I brought my nice big bowl of buttered popcorn, and I've got my my stadium drink with my movie snacks. So I'm ready. I'm hyped.
You are
It's gonna be
amazing.
a lot of
See,
fun.
bringing more food than you need. That's one of the rules. Survival.
That's right. First rule of survival. And the other one is it's okay to be a little bit superstitious. And we'll find out why as we move along through our movie list.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of superstition, that's perfect for the first one that I want to talk about, which is a movie that you and I have loved since it came out. And it's got a lot of controversy about it because people either love it or they hate it. And we get to be in column A because we love it. And that's the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, my favorite. Absolute
Yeah.
favorite.
Yeah, me too. And the Blair Witch Project was released in 1999, and it follows three college student filmmakers who are shooting a documentary about a local legend in Maryland called the Blair Witch, and they disappear mysteriously into the woods, and a year later their footage is found. And so these students are researching the Blair Witch, who in the mythology of the film was a woman banished from a small town in the 1800s and apparently went on to haunt the woods for 2 centuries, causing the deaths of many children and causing many unsettling incidents. And so what starts as a harmless film project for these filmmakers and a couple days of overnight camping in the woods, the trip quickly devolves into the frightening chaos of them becoming hopelessly lost, running out of food, and contending with a looming supernatural force that's quite invested in them never finding their way out. And it's
being hunted.
Yeah, being hunted. And so it's one of those pioneers of the found footage style movie, which adds to its reality. And I've honestly been obsessed with it ever since I saw it. I'll defend that to the grave.
Well, it's funny because I remember the actual sort of ad campaign, but it masqueraded as a website that was talking about these teenagers that went missing. And it was a hoax set up on purpose. And people started following this website, and then finally they announced they had this found footage. The sheriff and the police are going through this footage to try and figure out what happened to these kids. And then it was a few weeks later they announced, we have decided that we're going to bring the found footage to the public. And then that's how they launched the movie. And it wasn't until, after the movie had been running a couple of weeks or so that people began to understand that it was a hoax. But it was a great one. And some people believe that it was real and still believe
I know. Yeah, I mean, that's as far as the cultural impact goes. I mean, to this day, what the directors of that film did before the film's release still remains one of the greatest marketing stunts in history. And a lot of people that watch it today that weren't around back then, they weren't around back then, don't know that. The internet was still becoming a big tool in the 90s. And so the filmmakers, they utilized their online space to create this very real buzz about the movie with the website, the fake missing persons posters, describing the fake myth of the Blair Witch. They went as far to create a mockumentary about, post their disappearance and, who is the Blair Witch with fake testimonials and researchers. And, it created this fear and confusion in audiences that would eventually see the film. And that, like you said, was the perfect tone because many people actually believed that it was real. Which was really scary.
It really was. And one other story, when I watched it with a friend that I would occasionally go camping with. Our family,
Mm-hmm.
She and I had families that would go camping and maybe go fishing together. And we watched that movie together late one night when the boys were off with the kids, and it absolutely terrified us. And we were in this dark house by ourselves. And so when she turned off the movie, we both kind of started going around the house, turning on all the lights. I remember that.
Oh my God.
And then it wasn't too long after that, a month or two later, we were actually on one of our combined camping trips, and she and I started going for a walk. And she says, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go this way. And I said, why? And she goes, don't these sticks look strange? And she goes, they're giving me the creeps. Let's not go this way. So,
hey, that's a good lesson,
impact.
That's a good lesson, trust your intuition. I mean, sometimes when we're afraid, our intuition isn't always right. But, before you get into the thick of it and you get those initial, like, shouldn't be here feelings, always listen to that.
When it comes to something supernatural, trust your gut instincts.
Yeah, I know. And, I know it's a love it or hate it movie for people because I feel like those who hate it are the ones who there's nothing wrong with this, that would rather see the monster, have a resolution, have a definitive answer, and are irritated when they don't get that. Now, I get that as kind of like an expectation from a movie audience thing, but if you dial that back to just as a human being, we don't always get answers to everything. That's part of what makes fear and anxiety what they are, is that your brain wants an answer. I have anxiety, so I get the cases of the what ifs like crazy. And so a movie like this absolutely plays on somebody who has a what if machine in their head and a really active imagination, which you can imagine is way worse than anything they could show you. Well, that's true. And so
absolutely.
Yeah. And so I personally love it because I love psychological horror. And I think, what is not shown is always the scariest. And, the best thing is that it keeps you guessing to the very end and beyond the end. It's quote unquote ambiguous ending. And, it's really, really fun to think about, oh God, what was it at the end? What did that? And you're never going to know. You're just going to have to put it together yourself.
Well, I found myself believing the crazy lady in the beginning about the woman that was floating, and she had hair like a horse on her body. And that is a picture in my mind that I've never been able to get rid of. To me, that is, I don't care what anybody else says, that's Blair Witch.
She was creepy. That Mary Brown, she was creepy.
That was Mary Brown. I loved
Mary
her.
Brown.
She was like my favorite character in the whole movie, to be honest.
I know, she's on screen for like 2 minutes, but her impact is huge. And that's the thing. If you want to understand, take it from me and Mom, if you want to understand the ending of the Blair Witch Project, you have to pay attention to the exposition in the beginning when they're interviewing all the people in the town, telling you about the Blair Witch. When they're talking about in the 1940s, there was a child murderer. Sorry if that's sensitive content. Anyway, it's just a movie, who lived in a house way off in the woods and was supposedly told by the Blair Witch in his head to commit these awful murders of these children. And this guy is telling them about it as they're shooting the documentary and saying, he would take them down to the basement by twos, and then he would make one face into the corner, and then he'd kill the other one. And then he was done, he'd pull that one out of the corner and, that one too. And so when you see the end of the movie, you remember that part he says he couldn't take the eyes on him. He couldn't take the eyes watching him. And that's why he made him face into the corner like that. And so then when you know that and you remember that moment when you're watching the ending, your brain will call back to that and go,
yeah. And that's what makes something like a quiet scene of just seeing him facing the corner a jump scare. I remember that my friend and I, we both went, we saw him staring into the corner because the foreshadowing was so carefully done.
Absolutely.
What's funny is I just recently saw the other version of that, and I think you turned me on to it, the Blair Thumb.
Oh, the
Blair Thumb. And I watched that rendition of it, and it's hilarious. Oh my God, it's so hilarious the way they kind of dumb it down a lot, and they make her super annoying, and they make the other two like a couple of stoners,
Her name is Stressy.
Yeah, that's right. And Jish, there's Jish.
Jish. Yeah,
I'm sorry. I know I got us off topic a little bit.
No, it's very much on topic. If you're ever curious, if you're a Blair Witch fan, or if you just watched the movie for the first time, search that on YouTube. It's called The Blair Thumb, and it's quite ridiculous. I don't really have time to get into how ridiculous it is, but it is very faithful to the plot. But speaking of the plot, when it comes to survival lessons that we can learn from this movie, you know, a lot of them go without saying, but there's that same old trope of the hubris of the ignorant, self-assured young people heading into the woods, somewhat prepared, but not really. And this is something that new folks who move up here actually to the woods of Alaska from the city or the suburbs sometimes, you know, end up finding out pretty quickly. And that's that nature is the great equalizer. Okay. And being removed from it for a long time as human beings, you know, we forget these little things that if we overlook them, it can jeopardize our survival. You know, a lot of problems that we've solved now with a modern society. And I think that's the reason people tend to like under prepare or overestimate themselves when they come out here. You know, I've seen plenty of people move here that are totally capable, and some where you're like, honey, you're not going to survive the winter. You know, there are those kinds of people. And, you know, those situations where you're so remote, something, you know, has gone wrong, either you're lost or you're injured or both, you got no way to contact the outside world, and you're cut off from resources that you'd normally be able to find a way to have access to, like call 911. You know, when that happens to you and you're very used to a city setting and you can't solve problems like that anymore, it's really easy to panic, get consumed by fear, and do the wrong thing, which is very evident in this movie. You know, it creates this chain reaction of, you know, circumstances that make you worse off and less likely to survive. And I think in this movie, the students just walked right into that one, and the Blair Witch just capitalized on it.
Well said. And I totally agree with that. I think, you know, even they had a very cavalier attitude about preparation. You know, they what did they get to take into the woods with them? There's an awful lot of focus on the marshmallows and the alcohol. Yeah. You know, I know they had other food, obviously, but
power bars.
They're thinking they're going to be out there one night and then hiking back out the next day. So, and in terms of, you know, survival awareness, they don't seem to lay any exposition out about whether they told, you know, everybody where they were going, how long they were going to be gone, you know, when they would check in and that kind of stuff. I know that as a family, we always talk about that. Like when I went on my trip to the Rocky Mountains a couple years ago, you kept tabs on me as to when I went in and then came out of a cell-free interruption zone. So
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Little things like that mean a lot, even if you don't have GPS. I think they did have some dialogue at one point where they're going, well, you know, they're going to notice that I didn't get to work or something like that. And then they're going to call my folks, and then my folks will start looking for me, you know. And I thought, well, that's
not a good plan.
Too little, too late.
No, it is. Yeah, you're right. And they did not bring enough food for, you know, how long longer than they'd be out there. Because, I mean, it's not that you think something will go wrong, but again, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And also there was a lot of fishing that could have been done because they were having to follow the river to find their way out. And we'll talk about directions in a minute. But, you know, there were a lot of opportunities to find food. A lot of people, and myself included, believe that, and there's actually a deleted scene in the special features that shows Josh is trying to convince them that he wants to climb a tree so he can look around and see where they are. You know, and they're talking him out of it like they're afraid he's going to fall and break his arm or something. Again, that's the panic. What if the worst thing happens? You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to take a risk to, you know, make a huge...
Yeah, they're already in trouble, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And to allow him to at least do what little, who was it? It was Bilbo Baggins climbed a tree so he could see which direction they needed to go when they were in that Mirkwood or whatever it was called. So
yeah,
I mean, there's groundwork laid for that, obviously.
There is, and they had the ability to make fire. They could have made a few signal fires. You know, the thing that really interrupts the whole thing is that the supernatural element of the movie, the Blair Witch as an entity, in people's theories. It's all theories, okay? Because people make up their own minds about this movie. But the theory is that the witch is manipulating the woods and manipulating their sense of direction. And there's even a theory that came out in the 2016 version of the Blair Witch, where this whole thing of like she can manipulate time. So like they may have moved into a different time, like in the past or something, as of a certain point. Now they've done this deliberately with the editing and everything, but at a certain point, you don't notice planes flying over anymore in any of the shots. And so that people have built all these fun little theories about, what was happening in the Blair Witch Project.
That's a good one.
But when it comes to like the real stuff, two things that are really big about the Blair Witch Project and surviving it, and that is their ability to navigate. And that's twofold. Like, many agree that like Heather's the villain. She's not. They all made mistakes that made this not work. And like, yeah, her half-assed planning and her obsession with being in charge and leading everybody on the path to success, the ego, that's really just like the first link in the chain of disaster. You know what I mean? It's not her fault completely. It really isn't. And, but that ego undermines Josh and Mike's trust in her, causing arguments, detours, and the frequent map checking. Every time they check the map, they're turning around, they're changing their position, so they're getting off more and more and more every time that happens. And they're using a topographical map. So you have to have more than just a basic understanding of a topographical map, because the contour lines show elevation, ridges, valleys, all that stuff. And it has to be used correctly in conjunction with a compass. And passing it between them and Mike going, I'll tell you the truth, this looks like Greek to me. It's useless. Like one person should really be in charge of the map and the compass, or you guys can get off track really easily.
And maybe, just maybe, have more than one kind of navigational system on board.
Like GPS?
Have more than one map.
It was 1994, so GPS wouldn't have been a thing so much. But
GPS wasn't a thing yet, but people did have other ways of, they had different kinds of maps. But my main thing is just have more than one. So if you lose one, you still have a map,
Two is one and one is none, and that's a big one out here. And, the other thing is that, like, with the compass, like we're talking about how the Blair Witch might be manipulating their surroundings. They're also, like, you and I know this, there are serious errors that you can make with a compass. The serious errors. And, some of them include, like, you can hold it improperly, too tightly or close to metal objects. And if you're scared to death, you might be holding it really tightly. You're going to want to hold it flat and away from metal objects to ensure that you're getting accurate readings. And there can also be things like iron deposits and stuff that can throw off your readings. But another thing that people ignore with compasses is declination. You asked me this about Alaska and being near the poles and stuff. The declination is the difference between true geographic north and magnetic north, which is where that needle points. And I notice that lots of people who are new to compasses, they overlook this and they assume that north is always where the compass needle is pointing. And this can get you grossly off course. And so you can correct that by finding what the local declination value is for the area you're in and adjust your compass. And some of them have an adjustment feature. And there's lots of good videos on YouTube about this. And I know we're in the age of GPS, but, it's good to have a backup navigational tool that's analog, that you know how to use.
And the grid goes down for a little while or forever, whatever. We need to have backup mechanical methods and the ability to do certain kinds of math so that we can handle these types of situations. It's the same reason why I think you should be able to hand sew and mend your clothes. You should also be able to read a map and use a compass and use some math, so that you can get yourself out of some potentially hazardous situations. So
absolutely.
I totally agree.
All these things, including being cold and hungry, will severely impact your mental ability to do the right thing and do the smart thing. And one thing that drives me crazy that they do, I know they're obsessed with getting out and getting away from this thing that's following them. But the more they keep moving, the less capable a search party is of finding them. It's this old trick when you're lost. Stay put. Don't move. I mean, they should have just made a last stand, and then
exactly.
I don't know.
Do a ring of fires around their tent or something at night.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have been ready for that.
Sending out signals and protecting themselves from the spooks.
I mean, it's kind of that learned helplessness thing. I think that frustrates people about it. Yeah. But I mean, we could go on and on for, about what they could have done, but they were basically screwed from the minute they knocked over that pile of rocks in the graveyard in the woods. Don't upset the totems.
No. That's where the superstition, you do something and it's kind of like you set up bad luck for the rest of the movie.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So definitely the Blair Witch Project has a lot of survival elements, but it's what you don't see that's scarier. In this age where everything wants to throw the goriest thing in the world at you, we've become a bit desensitized, but, psychological horror will be timeless because of that. And this movie was huge when it came out. I rented it constantly and it scared the crap out of me, and it still does. I am very obsessed with it. So Mom, you're also a huge fan of this movie. So it's so nice to actually geek out and talk about it with you.
Well, and we have a certain list of movies that we review annually, and this is one of the ones. So this and a couple more that we're about to talk about.
The next big one is definitely one of my favorite snowbound movies, and that's The Shining.
Yeah.
That one definitely uses a setting of just absolute isolation and extreme winter as the fundamental aspect of the plot. And, The Shining came out in 1980. It's a film by Stanley Kubrick. It's based on a Stephen King book, the same name. And while, the two works are really different from each other, they really are. But each scary in their own right. And The Shining is definitely a horror classic. And I mean, I always love that opening shot that's so iconic with that main title by Wendy Carlos. Wow, 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 wow. It just gets you immediately. And the helicopter shots of the Colorado Rockies and that little tiny diminutive VW bug being the only car on the road. It's like...
It starts right out with the idea of isolation just by making them look so small as they make their way further and further into the mountains, into this remote location, which I think, and the music immediately tightens your stomach, because something's wrong right away. But, more than anything else, right out of the gate, I want to praise the casting on this. I know that it wasn't what Stephen King wanted in terms of portraying the main character, but I think that Jack Nicholson absolutely nailed the Jack Torrance role.
Scary.
He was able to go from normal to manic in, 0 seconds. And that grin.
Yeah.
That was before the Joker was such a big thing. He has the grin,
Yeah, so, wait till they get a load of me. I agree. I mean, the casting is very good, and a lot of people are just finding this out now. I used to have on video a behind the scenes documentary called The Making of The Shining. It was created by Stanley Kubrick's daughter, Vivian. And it's one of those things that the Stanley Kubrick cult people are into, like I am. So in it, you see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And one of the things to talk about is that, Stanley Kubrick was actually kind of not very kind to Shelley Duvall, very distant with her, very oh, come on, figure this out, and it kind of created that reaction that you see from her. She is as emotionally worn out as she looks. That's very real. And I guess maybe he didn't trust that he could just tell her that, he just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I understand the whole thing with directors manipulating something out of an actor, but, some people are very talented and can, bring it. But Stanley Kubrick was, unusual in that way, but he did make some amazing movies, and this definitely is one. But, and what's funny is that, the survival aspects of the story are kind of tricky to talk about because it's kind of a prevention thing, maybe don't get into this situation in the first place. And like, if those of you kind of remembering the story, it tells the story of the Torrance family. Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, like Mom said, his wife Wendy and their son Danny, and they're hired to be the live-in caretakers of the Overlook, which is a remote luxury hotel deep in the mountains that closes during the winter because heavy snow makes it way too expensive to keep the roads open. So the caretakers will be live-in, and they'll take care of the hotel from being left to the elements. So they live there completely alone from November until May the 1st. And so it's just like, the way that they could have survived The Shining at first would be like Jack goes to that interview, which is the first scene in the movie. If I hear a story that the previous caretaker chopped his family with an axe and then blew himself away, thank you, sir. I think I appreciate the opportunity, but I think I'll take my chances elsewhere.
I'll tell you what, that would be the first red flag. But not
red flag.
Maybe not so much thinking that I would go crazy if I took this job, but I would be haunted by the guy who had the job before me. So, I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's not
a bad sign right away.
It's an occupational hazard, I guess. So, yeah, definitely not doing that. And, I think it's also a lot to ask for a family with a small child to stay in such a remote place, where your only way out is a snowcat, which is a sort of tracked vehicle that you can use to get in and out of snowy conditions. And it's got a closed cab, and they use it in the farther north of here because conditions are so tough. You don't want to be exposed on a snow machine because you'll freeze to death very, very easily. So having a closed cab is useful, but only having one and then being responsible for the maintenance of it when it's new to you. Only having one CB radio, again, with the more than one thing.
Yeah, that's, it was so simple to isolate them so quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And having an atmosphere of, power hungry ghosts that want to absorb you, and your child's clairvoyant abilities doesn't really help either. And of course, one of the big elephants in the room is not just the impending winter that they're going to have to deal with, which has its own problems, but Jack as a character is very freshly on the wagon after being a chronic alcoholic, and did some pretty bad things when he was drinking. He loses his job at a university, which is one of the reasons why they need the money. They're economically in this bind where they've got to take this job. So, Stephen King loves to set you up for failure. His chance at redemption surrounds around this play that he's writing that might get picked up if he does it really well. He's like, oh, I'm going to go to the Overlook. 5 months of peace is just what I want. It's like, well, having one task and one task only, and then you're just bored the rest of the time. No work, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Absolutely. It did. It drove him crazy. And not only that, if that was the only thing that was going to get them out of their financial bind, so he goes up there feeling all this pressure. And if he gets distracted at all or whatever, it just ramps up his pressure, which makes him vulnerable emotionally. So it was pretty,
absolutely.
It was pretty amazing. And plus the fact that he starts seeing things, but for some reason he keeps it to himself. He doesn't share it with his wife. So you already get this feeling that the wife is very loving with the son, but everybody seems like they're in their own little isolation somehow,
That is so
they're up there, they're supposed to be there together as a family, but they don't even really have a strong family unit to begin with. Everyone's kind of like trying to survive life in their own way.
Absolutely. You're seeing this family at this stage of, disintegration with their trust towards each other.
Yeah.
There's not as much bond as there should be to hold them together. And that, the ghosts capitalize on that for sure.
Yeah.
And that's also a thing, I think about. I was talking about this with my neighbor at our bonfire the other night, that there was a couple that lived here in a cabin not far from me, and they just had a terrible marriage. Just the two of them just argued constantly, and there was not a lot of respect towards the wife, and that's kind of all I can say. I'm sure they had their reasons. It's none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's one thing that I know, it's that if your relationship's already on the rocks, moving to an isolated cabin in the middle of, to go through the winter together is not going to solve that problem. It's just going to make everything come to a head. And everything will come to a head. I promise you, nothing brings things in relationships to a head like being in a cabin together during a long winter.
Yeah, I'll tell you, if there ever was a time that you have to be on the same page, that would be it. And the same thing goes not only for the isolation, but facing any external threat. Isolation is a form of a threat that we don't really think about.
Yeah.
Think about the kind of impact it has on us. But I think a lot of us started to learn or began to understand during the pandemic when we all were asked to stay home for weeks on end. And I think that's when we all began to understand what cabin fever really means and how it does, for some people, have an impact on their lives.
Mm-hmm. And there's this idea that if you're like you and I, where we don't mind being alone and we kind of prefer it to being with people, that we'll be okay. And there's a homesteader that's been there for decades up north in Anwar, the Arctic National Wildlife Reserve, named Haimo Korth. You may have seen him on The Last Alaskans show. And he talked about how he did the first few years in the cabin up there by himself. And he said, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I wouldn't do it. The isolation, having no one to talk to but yourself and a moose, maybe and a dog, it'll drive you insane. So it's very serious things to think, and they did not have a lot of things in place to deal with seasonal affective disorder either at the Overlook. Talk about something that will not help you with seasonal affective disorder is alcohol. Because, I know the ghosts provide the alcohol, or maybe it wasn't there. I don't know, because the hotels, they said they remove all the alcohol from the premises before they close the hotel down. So that's what makes it like, how do they get alcohol? But alcohol will not help you during the winter. It increases, it's a depressant. So it already increases that in your head. And the darker that it gets, you do not need anything that will make you more depressed and more angry. It will not help you.
Yeah. And I can imagine that a certain kind of artificial timeline needs to be adhered to so that you keep your rhythms up, like exercising during a certain time of the day to kind of boost your metabolism and things like this. There's
mental health.
Yeah, the mental health is a big
mental health is very important
for a long stay over the winter. You have to deal with it all the time or annually. But, you have ways to get in and out, though. It's not like you're 20 miles from the nearest neighbor, which is closer to their situation.
Yeah, if I was like as far out as they were, like my child getting strangled by a crazy lady in a bathtub, like that's a medevac situation. And if I can't call them, like, man. So, yeah, I will, do one last thing about The Shining before we move on from it, is that I love the way that Danny tricks Jack in the hedge maze scene at the end, because there's snow everywhere and Jack's following his footprints, as you would. Snow's a dead giveaway of where you've been unless there's an active blizzard happening. So, but then Danny steps back into his own footsteps, jumps off to the side, erases that he did it, and expects that his crazy, cold, confused, angry dad is not going to know where he went. And he just assumes he's disappeared. And then he starts trudging off some other way. Danny waits for him to be gone and then follows his own tracks all the way back out of the maze. I was like, yay, smart boy. I was always so proud of him, so having clairvoyance is definitely a way to survive The Shining, but the best thing to do is just don't go. There are other ways to make money. I promise. There will be a way.
Yes, exactly. What's next?
Oh, the next one. You're going to like this next one. It's also Stephen King. It was also adapted from a Stephen King book. The setting, you find out from the book, takes place not far from the Overlook Hotel, actually. And it was fantastic. It was directed by Rob Reiner, stars Kathy Bates and James Caan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Misery.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That movie is so creepy.
It's great.
When it came out, it made me so uncomfortable. That movie, that one is the one that can really make me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I feel like it's more claustrophobic than The Shining.
Yeah.
Way, way more claustrophobic. And the scariest thing about it is that there is no supernatural force. This is a real situation that could happen to you. That's what makes it so terrifying, unlike the first two that we just talked about. And, if those of you who are remembering this movie, like, oh, yeah, Kathy Bates and James Caan are the stars in this, and they carry the whole movie. And basically, it's about this romance writer named Paul Sheldon, and he's finishing one of his latest manuscripts in a town in Colorado in the mountains, and he gets into an accident, and he's rescued by Kathy Bates, who turns out to be his number one fan. But we find out she's more than just a fan. So basically, like, the first thing that with Paul Sheldon going to this secluded lodge in the first place, like, that's like part of his personal tradition. He's superstitious. So he does this habitually. And so he goes in, he pays in full, and then he stays till he's done, and then he just leaves and he doesn't tell anybody. And that harkens back to that thing you and I were talking about, where if you're going to leave and you're going to go through some serious weather or mountains or whatever, he could have talked to the guy at the front desk and said, hey, I'm going to X place. Like, oh, yeah, you're going to there. Okay, well, where's the number? Can I call, make sure you made it there okay? There's none of that. That way, nobody knows where he crashed, because he veers off the road and crashes his what, do you have, a Mustang? I think he had a Ford Mustang with no chains.
He was driving way too fast. I don't think he had chains on.
No.
And ignoring the weather. Just really.
He didn't check the weather before he went. He didn't. He says it to Kathy Bates, I didn't know a storm was coming. And it's like, well, you could have looked at the sky. I would have told you that. But he was not really thinking about that. So, you have these first two mistakes that set him up. And then the next thing, his car goes careening off the highway into the snowdrift, and it rolls over. He's very, very badly injured. Probably would have died if she hadn't busted him out of the car. So again, prevention's worth a pound of cure, because once he's in the situation with her, he's screwed. Once he's in that situation, he's completely, bed bound. He can't get up. His legs are destroyed. His arms are broken. His neck is injured. Just, it's not good.
No. And even though, she's rescued him the first time I saw the movie, at first I thought, well, he's lucky that she found him. And at first you kind of halfway believe her, but something is off. And then, of course, you find out that she's a number one fan. But yeah, Kathy Bates was so good in that. Absolutely.
Oh, man, forgive me for prattling on, Paul, making you feel all oogie. Mr. Man.
Mr. Man.
Now, isn't that a noogie mess? Yeah, that's just, oh God, she was great. Stephen King loved her in that movie. He said, oh, I thought she was to die for. Like, she's just so great. Because that's the thing, is that she comes off so sweet and caring and a little bit weird in the beginning, but you're kind of like, well, she's rural. Take it from me, rural people are a little weird. There's something a little off about all of us, so she don't talk to people much, and you got the idea that she was kind of reclusive. She's got this cabin, it's kind of secluded. She has, grid power, but she's off the main road, and she's living there alone. There's nobody else there. And she is a nurse. She used to be a nurse. So she sets his broken legs. She gives him food, pain medication, and then admits that she happens to be his number one fan. And only slightly disconcerting is that later she admits that she knew that he'd be at the lodge finishing his new book because she's kind of obsessed with him. And that's how she noticed him veer off the road and get into the accident. And she keeps saying, like, well, when the roads are open again and the phone lines work, I'll call an ambulance for you. But then days just keep going by and she keeps making more excuses until he realizes that she's like been going to town so much that, she could have used a phone to alert somebody about him. And she even buys the newest copy of his book that just came out, not the one he's writing or just wrote, but the one that just got released. And then she discovers that her beloved character, the titular Misery, has been killed off. I'll never forget that. You dirty bird. How could you? And just freaks out and erupts in a rage and tells him that she never called anyone and no one is coming for him. And that if I die, you die. And you're just like, oh, shit. We are screwed.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, when she blows up, that you think she's going to kill him right then, possibly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you find out that she's stronger physically than she looks. I mean, she carried him from the car, for God's sake, up to her house. She's this tiny lady, but she's way stronger than she looks. And so she's very scary. He's so vulnerable. But, it's funny. There's not a lot of other ways than what he actually does through the course of the film to survive, because that is what you do. You're badly injured. You kind of have to psychologically humor this person. But he does make a mistake trying to escape, because anybody who's seen the film will never forget the famous hobbling sequence. Oh, God.
Well, and there was a lot of turmoil when they were making the movie about whether to go through with what Stephen King actually did in the book.
Yeah, it's different.
It wasn't hobbling that happened in the book. In the book, she takes a hatchet and cuts off his foot. And they didn't want to horrify the fans that much. And they went back and forth over, well, what should we do? And they finally came up with the hobbling scene, which I'm not really sure if that was any less terrible.
When you see her put that block between his feet and you just know that this is happening, and then they show you and the foot just swings, you're just like, oh, like, it's so bad. It's so hard to watch. And you're just like, man, he is in so much trouble. And you're trying to calculate in your head how much time has passed, because he's been sick and injured and out of it from the drugs and everything. So keeping track of the time would definitely be something that you'd have to do to know, and you can tell that out the window. He starts to realize spring thaw is coming. So someone's going to find his car that's overturned in the ditch. And you've got this, Buster, who's the sheriff. He's not really as much of a figure in the book. They kind of created him as a composite character for the movie, I think. And he's so smart. I love Buster. So great. And he tracks him down finally. And there's a whole tense scene of thinking Kathy Bates is going to kill him when he's snooping around. And then he hears Paul in the cellar where Kathy Bates dumped him to keep him quiet. And he knocks something over and Buster comes back and opens the door. And Paul Sheldon reaches out to him like, oh my God. And he's like, Mr. Sheldon, but bam. And she just nails him with a shotgun. You're just like, really?
Because we have this attachment to this character, and you think that the sheriff is actually going to finally be the hero and save the day.
Nope.
This is horror.
Nope.
Horror
and
doesn't
it's
let
just
that happen.
And then you're just like, dude, at that point you're so invested in this, the tension in that movie, you can cut it with a knife. They did it so well. You just like, there's not a lot holding this story together. It's just these two characters in this house, and she's not letting him go, and we're exploring the depths of her madness. and her obsession with him, and then finding out the things that she did in her past when he finds her scrapbook.
That's
and
crazy,
finds out
man.
that it's scary, scary stuff. But, it really is kind of an escape room kind of movie. You have to figure out, he has to make himself stronger. He has to outthink her. And one of the best ways that's been talked about to sort of rationalize with a mentally unstable person is to speak to them as if they're sane and talk their language to them and be kind and be understanding and be sympathetic. Just kind of, I've had to do this with some people that have been lights are on, but nobody's home. And you have to kind of talk their language to get out of the situation. And that takes some artfulness, psychologically. And so, that you have to, find a way. I was going to say one last thing about Misery that I almost forgot that I love the best about it. And it's that sense of humor in it. Because it's kind of funny, like, after she breaks his ankles, the next morning she's outside the window with the pig that she's named Misery, and she waves to him and goes, "Hi, Pumpkin." And he just gives her the finger. Such a kidder.
Yeah, I kind of remember some funny stuff happening between the sheriff and his wife. They're one of those kind of places where they have, 2 or 3 people who do everything.
That's exactly how my town is. We don't have a sheriff, but if we did, it would be a lot like that. A lot like that. And I know couples that are like that around here. Like, that was a deputy call. He wants to know who you're having an affair with. Like, there's that spice again. It's just those kinds of insults that have given our marriage real spice over the years.
Real spice. I love it.
Yeah, those people are real. And so I don't know. The reason misery scares me because it's like that could happen in a town like mine, and it's creepy. It's absolutely creepy. But basically, Paul learns his lesson. And I love how at the end, after he's survived and he has a cane and he's sitting there having dinner with his agent, and they're asking him if he wants to do an autobiographical book about what went on in that house. And he's like, "Oh, if I didn't know any better, it sounded like you're asking me to dredge up the worst horror of my life just to make a few bucks." But that experience helped me. I still think about her sometimes.
Ooh.
I know. Yeah, and then the dessert lady comes up with the cart and goes like, "Excuse me, are you Paul Sheldon? I just want to tell you I'm your #1 fan." It's like, that's very sweet of you. We're running through the list here. We've only got 2 more to dive into.
All right, well, lay it
the next one I think you're really, really going to like. And it takes place in a very isolated environment, Antarctica.
Does it involve a form of an alien?
An alien that assimilates?
Yeah.
And Kurt Russell?
The Thing.
Yes, it's The Thing. Yes.
I love that movie so much.
I know.
I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's just because I have a crush on Kurt Russell, possibly, but
I understand.
It's just an awesome movie. Awesome.
I understand. It's definitely a favorite. It's John Carpenter movie and one of his most beloved. And the best thing about it is that you have 2 really cool elements to it. You have this extreme winter of Antarctica and an alien life form. Those 2 things together, like, wow, it makes a lot of sense. And it takes place at an Antarctic research center. And the first scene is this, you never forget it. It's this random sled dog running across the open tundra, and it's being shot at by 2 guys in a helicopter. You're like, why are they trying to shoot this poor dog? Like, what the heck? And then the helicopter lands at the American base. These are Norwegians in the helicopter. And the dog runs over to the guys and they're like, "Hey, buddy," and because that was what you would do. You wouldn't know any better. And the Norwegian is like, "Get away from that thing." In Norwegian, they can't understand him. Like, "Get away from it. It's not real," is essentially what he's saying. And he tries to throw a grenade at it. He miscalculates and he throws it, and it lands out of his hand this way behind him and blows up the helicopter.
Yeah.
And then once the Norwegian is dead, then they definitely don't know. They don't have any way of finding out what the deal is. And the dog, they take him in. The dog's kenneled with the base sled dog team. And then suddenly we realize it's not a dog. It's this shape-shifting, horrible thing that just, oh my God, the polar opposite of something like the Blair Witch Project, where we see the evil in this movie. It's just, oh my God. And the effects in this movie were groundbreaking at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there were no special effects other than the ones that could be made actually, or what you would call practical effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said that the practical effects actually creeped out the actors too.
It did, which was great. That's perfect. You want them to react to this, and it's disgusting. It just, oh God, and the noises it makes, like it makes all these crazy noises.
When you talk about movies like these, I have to start pounding down the popcorn.
The nervous ticks start. No, I know. So basically the thing is an alien life form capable of assimilating and replicating any organism. So the whole idea is it's impossible to know who's your buddy and who is the thing. And everyone in this film is picked off one by one by the thing, either turning them into or being killed by it. Like, I'll never forget that damn defibrillator scene where the chest turns into teeth that chomps that guy's eyes. Just, oh God.
Just takes his arms right off.
That's so startling. That gets me every time. But, the really scary thing in it really is the paranoia. The paranoia is intense in this movie. And it is what is the biggest problem when it comes to, I think, surviving a situation like this, is that if you're trapped with this alien, just like the researchers, there's a bunch of things that I think are really important to focus on. One of the first things is you guys have got to stay together. Stop splitting up. I mean, the seeds of dissent take root. They start to not trust each other. And then when they don't trust each other anymore, they start splitting up. And that's when the thing can isolate them and get at them. And then when they all come back together, you don't know who is the thing. And so that's the first thing, is that once you realize that that's its MO, stay together, don't separate, don't get, and the thing is, it just like with the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, it's just an organism trying to survive, and knowing your enemy is really important. So understanding how this thing operates would be huge to surviving it.
Yeah. It's amazing too, because I think there's a part of human envy as well in the background, because we can't just chop off a leg and that leg can now grow another body and we grow another leg. There is no such thing. But with this organism, any part of it is capable of becoming a complete organism as long as it can find the raw material. And that's what these hapless dudes are, raw material for this thing to replicate itself. And
I know.
It is so amazing too, because instead of having a centralized brain like we have, this thing must have some kind of hive mind that is disseminated amongst all the various parts. You know what I mean? Like all the blood drops running together and things like that. So, just thinking about what kind of alien this is tends to break my mind. Besides the whole terror of the paranoia and the cold and the hopelessness of their situation. I mean, geez.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look where you are, for God's sake. That's a pretty remote location where no one's just going to casually drop by and say, how you guys doing? They have to wait for the rescue team. Who knows when they'll get there, when they stop receiving signals from them. And if there's intense weather, which there obviously is, that could be a while, because it's like a no-fly zone. No one's coming in. And when they start to understand the alien can be killed by fire, and they start using flamethrowers, that was a case of kind of like, okay, we're starting to understand this thing and how we can kill it. But they really, I'm right, I think you're right, they neglect the fact that it can break into a lot of pieces, like the head with the spider legs that just is in the corner, and they just go, and just kill it.
That has to be like the coolest scene of all, the head dropping off, growing legs, and running away. You know, to me, that's almost humorous.
I know.
And I don't know what kind of person I am, but sometimes I'm screaming and laughing at the same time at how ridiculous something is, you know?
It is totally that way. There is totally a sense of humor with it being just so grotesque. You know, the other thing that gets me is when they're trying to find out who's the thing. There would be a lot of ways to figure this out. One would be, like I said, stay together. That way you're not, you just eliminate that mystery. But then when you really got to know, I mean, beyond the blood test that, McCready created, you could probably like ask somebody like about, do you have any inorganic material like fillings or something in your teeth that would not be there if the thing assimilated you, because it would perfectly recreate your DNA, which wouldn't see that missing. So, but I do love that moment when the blood jumps out of the tray.
Yeah, you almost feel sorry for it.
God, I know. And then that guy starts changing, and they're all tied to the chair trying to get away from it. Like, oh, no.
Oh, man.
No.
That is probably the most intense scene of the whole movie. When the one is melting down, the thing is melting down and getting ready to absorb. And all those big grown masculine men are screaming like little girls. It was great. Great. And of course, that's when the guns won't work, right? There's like, the flamethrower was stuck or something.
Of course it wouldn't, but the other problem I have is that when Dr. Blair loses it and starts destroying the computers with the sledgehammer, I think it was, they made a huge survival error by isolating him, because it makes it easier for him to get assimilated, and it ruins their helicopter, because the alien who's taken him over is converting it into a spaceship. And so, it's ruining their means of escape, all that. They could have just sedated him and kept him in the room with them. And that probably would have been better. But yeah, again, with the fear making us not make good decisions, and the paranoia, and some, I don't get too into this, but there's a little bit of alpha male thing going on there. Like, well, who said you were the leader? You'll see that in so many movies. Like,
there was a bit
I watched a really interesting movie called The Gray with Liam Neeson, where he's the sharpshooter for the Arctic pipeline in Alaska. And it's in Alaska, and then their plane crashes. It's like really realistic, that plane crash. And he's in charge of shooting wolves at the pipeline to keep them from hurting the employees and stuff like that. But then they're in this survival situation out in the woods, and everybody is basically cooperating because Liam Neeson seems to be the only person who knows what he's doing. And he's he doesn't BS anybody. He's just like, you're going to die. That's what's happening. But it's going to be okay. You're okay. All these crazy things. And there's this one guy who's just like, yeah, well, who put Irish in charge? And then I'm just sitting there going, that guy is terrified. And that's the only way he knows how to assert, dominance in that situation. And then Liam Neeson calls him out on it and goes, you're scared. Wouldn't it be better to just admit that you're afraid?
Yeah. No,
So
that's just awesome.
A really good, and it could be anybody, any gender, anything, to be a good leader, you have to be able to properly assess the situation and do what's for the good of everyone, even if not everyone agrees. That was another one where an organism took advantage of these people not keeping it together. And then you only have two of them, McCready and Childs are the only one left at the end. It's a very open ending, and they've blown the spaceship up, but we still don't know if one of them is the thing or not. Yeah. So,
well, it's one of them, if not both.
I know. Well, and you also have the cold, you've got temperatures down to, -80, and they didn't have much of a plan after destroying their escape vehicle and their means of generating power and their shelter. Yeah. So they could have built a temporary shelter, with materials and even snow. The snow being so packed out there, they could have cut it to make a shelter. And there are so many methods of extreme cold survival that the Inuit have used for generations that would work there. And salvaging any available equipment or food left over and clothing at the base while they're waiting to be rescued, and just stay put. And for the love of God, don't pour whiskey in the computer because it beats you at chess.
Yeah, and not only that, at the end, what are they doing? They're drinking,
Again,
alcohol.
with the drinking.
The one thing, they should have food, warmth, shelter. No, they're taking swigs because it's a hopeless situation. So, yeah, I know.
Well, it's only as hopeless as you accept it to be.
Right.
I think that there is kind of an element where these are extreme scenarios, but this whole let's just, be hopeless about it. While that's a very common thing, I think that we can unlearn that, as human beings. The more capable we learn to be in our lives, the less some of these things scare us. It's not that we won't be scared. It's just you're going to feel the fear, but you're going to have okay, well, I know how to approach this. Come in and ask the fear to take a back seat so that you can solve a problem, whether that's a shape-shifting alien or, whatever.
You got to use the tools you have, whether you succeed or not, but at least know the tools and use the tools you have.
Absolutely. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't add one more to our list here that we're talking about. And it is absolutely like you and I, it's one of our favorite movies, not just for Halloween, of all freaking time. And that's Aliens.
Yeah. It was somehow formative to me in ways I didn't understand, because when the first one came out, and I think, what was that, 76, 77? The
I
original
think so.
Alien came in.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the date, but yeah, that's 70s.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. Might have been 79.
To have a female lead role, because the captain is killed. So Sigourney Weaver's character Ripley has to take over at one point. And to that, it was very inspiring to women like me who were just kind of getting an idea that, we were starting to understand there was a glass ceiling, right? In terms of our work lives. So that was it was one of these leading edge kind of ideas, and I really enjoyed that. But then when Aliens came out, they just took that and brought that basic premise up a notch, taking it from not just being able to take the lead and be capable at a certain job, but to literally move up to hero status. So, that was a really big deal for me. And I think that's the reason why, I found myself rewatching it and sharing it with my daughters, and even using pieces of it in my own personal therapy. I mean, it was therapeutic to have a strong role model that you can put in your mind to be.
Absolutely. So absolutely. Yeah. I dressed up as Ripley last Halloween because of how much I loved.
That's right. I remember that. It was an awesome picture. Have to repost that.
I might. But that she's
of all your different ones, but yeah, that was one of my favorites.
And I'm with you, about that. And Sigourney Weaver just plays it so well. That's the whole thing. She really nails that incredibly intelligent, resourceful, very human element of having to be courageous, even though she's absolutely petrified. And talk about a more hopeless situation. You're in space. It kind of reminds me of being way out in the bush in Alaska. Your tagline is "In space, no one can hear you scream." And that's like the epitome that no one's coming to help you. Least of all this corporation that in both movies doesn't give a crap about any of them, sends the crew to their deaths basically in each movie. And, we're specifically talking about the first Alien and the second Alien here. We don't really acknowledge the ones that came after it. I'm not a fan. The first two are the best. I'm sorry. Argue with me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. 1 and 2 forever.
I know, 1 and 2 forever. When I say the reluctant hero, those are sometimes the ones that we we identify with more, because they're not, dashing into the fray. Like, they do not want to be there, especially like, they just kind of have this thing come on board in the beginning in the first movie. And Ripley's even saying, like, we got to put that, in quarantine. We can't bring that into the ship. I don't care if he's been attacked by this thing that broke his helmet. Like, he cannot come in through quarantine. Basically, in Alien and Aliens, you will survive if you listen to Ripley. Like, for God's sake. Like, that is what will make you survive Aliens, is listen to Ripley, because she knows what she's talking about. And, it's just such a great movie. And, I watched an interview with Quentin Tarantino, who was talking about when he and his friends first saw Aliens in Los Angeles, and that they've been looking forward to it because they loved Aliens so much. And they're like, not only was Aliens great, it delivered above and beyond what we thought it was going to. It was just so much of a powerhouse of a movie, beyond just the action and the special effects. Like, it really just gets you. Yeah. And the horror of the xenomorphs themselves and how they have progressed with the puppetry and the design of these characters, which is terrifying. The way they're lit, all the KY jelly added to make them all drooly, just like, God.
Man.
But you brought up something interesting about the xenomorphs, which, kind of like why we like Jurassic Park, which is that, they are animals. They have a way of functioning. They have, they have their own needs. They are trying to reproduce. They are trying to eat. They're trying to protect themselves. They're not just like inherently evil. They're an animal. They're a very, albeit intelligent, well-armed animal that is an apex predator. But, understanding that, entails respect for them. And a lot of the people that die in these movies do not have respect for this alien. Therefore, you can't, you don't stand a chance.
Yeah. And the other thing about why, I think absolutely you have to respect your enemy so that you can analyze what their strengths are. And what was it? The Native Americans say that, in a way, they love their monsters because the monsters are what teach us to be more careful and to be more aware and to respect nature.
Well, so, there's an Easter egg pun absolutely intended at the end of the end credits of Aliens. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but if you stick all the way to the end of the credits, all the way to the end, and you listen, you turn the volume up, there's a sound of an egg opening.
Oh, you know what? After all these years, I never knew that. That's awesome. I'm going to have to check for that the next time.
Yeah. So, yeah. But, I think definitely listening to Ripley is how you're going to survive Aliens. You cannot trust this corporation to protect you. It's kind of like not being able to trust the government to protect you. There's kind of an element of that you are on your own. Like, this is it. You're on your own. No one's coming to help you. And I love the little girl, Newt, and how she survived by herself going through the air shafts and everything. And she's like, this little girl survived longer than any of the colonists with no weapons and no training. And she just salutes them.
Well, why don't you put her in charge then?
I know. Oh, God. Oh, man. Bill is so great in that movie. Bill Paxton's so great in that movie. Like, it's over, man. Game over. But Newt is she follows all the rules of survival. She gets to know how the aliens operate. She says, like, we should go inside because it'll be getting dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
Yep, exactly.
That's why she survived for so long. She's paid attention to how they act, and so there's a lot of ways to survive a creature feature. But, I think you and I can both agree that the best scene in the entire movie is the very end when you think it's over. And then that razor blade of a scorpion tail comes through the android Bishop and lifts him up to half, and the queen has stowed away on the ship. And then Ripley's gets in the big hydraulic suit and get away from her, you bitch. You're like, man.
So badass. That is my most favorite part of the movie. She's in that cargo hauler and she just goes one-on-one like a robots at war. It was just so amazing.
Well, there's like a female versus female thing going on there too, like mother and mother. You know, like mother's like, oh, you blowtorched my eggs, and she's like, yeah, well, you're threatening my only sort of adopted daughter, and it's just two heavyweights, really. Yeah. Even though Ripley is smaller physically, like they have the same weight and pull, you know, towards each other. And man, it's just such a ride, and it's great to watch even when it's not Halloween. But the thing that creeps me out the most about it, that makes it really a great movie for Halloween, is the score by James Horner is so creepy, like with, you know, all the horns and the creepy strings, and just, it's so unforgettable.
Well, the horns really are evocative of a military tone, because that's what this really has been. The entire movie just focuses on the military way of dealing with a problem and how totally unprepared they were for this kind of perfect predator, you know. And the music has the occasional little snare sound and the ba 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 kind of sound. It's just really, you know, but it sounds like it's out in empty space, like, you know, you're tooting your horn, but you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's very lonely. It's very lonely, but it's also incredibly like powerful. A lot of that music has been sampled for action trailers. That whole dun 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 dun. You know, it just, then whatever, an explosion happens or something like that's been sampled so many times. But the movie is absolutely iconic, and you can learn a lot of how to conduct yourself in a survival situation from Ripley. She wants to learn everything about her weapon. You know, it's just like, you know, show me everything. I want to know everything. You know, and, you know, what's this little button do on the side of the gun? And so when she's going in to find Newt after Newt's been taken to the hive by the aliens, and this is one of my favorite scenes, when she's all strapping herself in, and she's obviously terrified, but she's doing this. And when the elevator doors open and she emerges out of the mist and she's got the pilot light lit for her flamethrower, and you're just like, yes!
She's full on Rambo, man.
Yeah, she's a huge role model. Huge role model. So
like I think that's you know, she's part of my personal therapy.
Absolutely, man. And she is definitely the perfect kind of person to look toward if you want to develop more strength and belief in yourself. Yeah. Great image to hold in your head to survive anything. So we talked about the Blair Witch Project, The Shining, Misery, The Thing, Aliens. And, you know, there is so much to learn from these movies, and I'm glad that we have. And I really, really enjoyed talking about them with you. It's been so great. You're sitting in your little room with all your Halloween lights and your whole decorations and your cute little costume, eating your popcorn. And it's just, you really know how to get me into the spirit of the season, no matter what season it is. And I love having that connection with you, even from all these thousands of miles away. And I'm glad I could share that here on the podcast with everyone.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. To me, this is a fun way to celebrate Halloween. I get to dress up, hang out with my daughter for the evening, and get to talk about all the things that we love to chat about. To me, this is just another one of our phone calls. Thank you, honey.
Me too. You're welcome. Thank you for being on the show again, and hopefully you'll come back on again soon. I'm planning a Snowbound movies episode to maybe have in the dead of December. So maybe we could revisit some of these. Yeah. All right, Mom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, honey. Love you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye.
So, wow. I hope you all enjoyed this extra long special episode and that it was informative, and hopefully it'll add a new dimension to all the movies that she and I discussed that may increase your enjoyment the next time you watch them, or your fear. There's always a valuable lesson about survival to be gleaned from pretty much any horror film, and thinking like that just makes them more fun to watch, I think. I want to thank my patrons on Patreon for making this episode possible. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider becoming a patron. I appreciate contributions from my listener community so much. Visit patreon.com/myfarnorthcabin. And I want to thank my mom for coming on the program and sharing her love of Halloween with me and with you. So to all of you out there, have a happy and safe Halloween. And until next time, keep building that survival mindset and stay wild.
So you heard noises last night?
It was like there were two separate noises coming from two layers of space over here, and one of them was kind of like, one of them could have possibly been an owl, but the other one was like a cackling.
Way.
It was a total cackling, man.
If I heard a cackling, I would have shit in my pants.